I decided to sell my husband's office because I thought he was hiding money. But what I found inside that shed didn't explain where our savings went. It explained why he stopped coming to bed at night. And the truth didn't just break my heart. It made me question if I ever really knew the man I married. My name is Clara, and I am about to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. It is the kind of story that starts like any ordinary Tuesday, but ends with you questioning if you ever really knew the person sleeping next to you for 15 years. I want you to sit down somewhere comfortable, maybe make a cup of tea, because this is going to take a while. But I promise you, every word is true, and by the time I am done, you will understand why I decided to sell my husband's office, and why the truth that came after left me completely speechless. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the very beginning, because that would take too long, but back to the moment when I first realized that something was terribly wrong in my marriage. I am a simple woman. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a farmer. My mother taught me to read before I started kindergarten, and my father taught me that a handshake means something. I was taught that hard work pays off, that honesty is the best policy, and that family comes before everything else. When I met Mark at a college in Chicago during a freak snowstorm that shut down the entire city, I thought I had found my forever person. He was kind, gentle, and had a way of making me feel safe in a world that often felt very big and very scary. He carried a thermos of hot chocolate and an extra scarf, and he gave them both to me without expecting anything in return. That was Mark, always prepared, always caring, always thinking of others before himself. I still remember the way the snowflakes melted in his hair and the way he laughed when I sneezed for the 10th time. It was the kind of laugh that made you want to hear it again and again. We married 2 years later in a small church ceremony with just our closest friends and family. I wore my mother's wedding dress, which she had worn in 1985, and Mark cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. His best man, a guy named Tom from his college days, handed him a tissue and whispered something that made Mark laugh through his tears. I did not know what Tom said, but I did not care. All I cared about was that I was marrying the man I loved more than anything in the world. For a long time, I thought we had the kind of love that people write songs about. The kind of love that survives anything. The kind of love that makes old couples hold hands on park benches. We bought a small house with a big backyard on the outskirts of Chicago. It was nothing fancy, just 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that needed updating. The previous owners had left it in rough shape. The floors were scratched, the paint was peeling, and the faucet in the kitchen dripped constantly. But it had potential, and more importantly, it had space. Space for Lily, our daughter who came along 3 years into our marriage. Space for a garden where I grew tomatoes and basil and sunflowers that reached toward the sky. And space for Mark's dream, a backyard office where he could work as a freelance architect. Mark built that office with his own 2 hands. Well, mostly. He hired a crew for the foundation and the electrical work because he said he did not want to burn the house down or have the shed sink into the ground. But he did the framing, the insulation, the drywall, and the painting himself. It took him 6 months, working on weekends and late into the night after Lily went to bed. I remember one night in particular. It was past midnight, and I woke up to find his side of the bed empty and cold. I looked out the window, and there he was in the backyard, wearing his old flannel jacket and a headlamp, hammering away at the frame of the office. I brought him a cup of coffee and a blanket, and he kissed me and said, "This is going to be our future, Clara. This office is going to bring in so many projects that we will be able to send Lily to any college she wants. We will be able to travel. We will be able to retire early and sit on a beach somewhere and watch the waves." I believed him because I loved him, and because I wanted to believe that hard work and talent were enough. For the first few years, Mark was right. The office brought in good work. He designed small renovations, then whole houses, then a small commercial building for a local bakery that became famous throughout the neighborhood. His reputation grew, and so did our bank account. We took Lily to Disney World for her 5th birthday. She wore a little mini mouse ears headband and screamed with joy when she saw Cinderella's castle. We bought a new car, a sensible sedan that fit 3 car seats, even though we only had 1 child. We started talking about adding a 2nd bathroom to the house, because waiting for the bathroom every morning was becoming a problem. Life was good. No, life was wonderful. I remember sitting on our porch swing one summer evening, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard while Mark grilled hamburgers, and thinking that this must be what happiness feels like. Solid. Warm, safe. The kind of happiness that makes you believe in tomorrow. But happiness is a fragile thing. It can crack without you even noticing, like a coffee mug with a hairline fracture. You keep using it, keep filling it with hot liquid, until one day it just splits apart in your hands and burns you. That is what happened to us. The crack was small at first, almost invisible. But it grew and grew and grew until there was nothing left but broken pieces. The first crack appeared about 3 years ago. Mark came home from a meeting with a client looking pale and distracted. His face was gray, the way it gets when you have not slept well for weeks. I asked him what was wrong, and he said the client had decided to go with another architect. He said it was no big deal, that these things happened, that he would find another project soon. I told him not to worry, that there would be other clients, that his talent would carry him through. He nodded and smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It stayed on his lips, frozen and false, while his eyes remained empty. I should have asked more questions that night. I should have sat him down and demanded to know what was really going on behind that fake smile. But I did not. I was tired from a long day at the dental office where I worked as a hygienist. I was thinking about Lily's school project due the next day, a diorama of the rainforest that we had not even started. I was thinking about the grocery list and the pile of laundry on the couch and the fact that we were out of milk. I was thinking about 1,000 small things, and I let the big thing slip away. Over the next few months, Mark started spending longer hours in his office. At first, I thought he was working harder to find new clients. I would look out our bedroom window at night and see the light on in the shed, and I would feel a mix of pride and worry. Pride because he was working so hard to provide for our family. Worry because he seemed so tired all the time, so distant, so unlike the man I had married. He stopped coming to bed with me. He would stay in the office until 2 or 3 in the morning, then sleep on the small couch in there instead of walking back to the house. I would wake up alone in the dark and reach for him, and my hand would find only cold sheets. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once he landed a big project, everything would go back to normal. He would come back to bed. He would laugh again. He would be my Mark again. But normal never came back. Our savings started to shrink. Mark handled the finances because he said numbers made me anxious, and I was happy to let him. I am not good with numbers. I am good with people, with teeth, with making nervous patients feel calm. But numbers have always made my brain feel fuzzy, like trying to see through fogged-up glasses. So I trusted Mark to pay the bills, to manage the accounts, to keep us on solid ground. And for years, he did. He was careful and organized. He had spreadsheets for everything. He knew exactly how much we spent on groceries and utilities and Lily's dance classes. But then he stopped. Or maybe he tried and could not. I will never know for sure because he never told me. He just let everything slide, like a boat drifting away from the dock while the person on shore watches and does nothing. The first time I thought about selling his office was on a rainy Thursday in October. Lily, who was 7 at the time, had asked for a new winter coat because hers had a broken zipper. It was a small thing, a simple request from a little girl who did not understand why her parents said maybe instead of yes so often these days. I checked our bank account online, and my heart just sank. There was barely enough for the coat, let alone the electric bill due next week and the water bill due the week after that. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the screen, willing the numbers to change. They did not. They stayed red and ugly and terrifying. Mark was in his office as usual, and I remember standing at the kitchen window, watching the rain slide down the glass, and thinking, that shed is just sitting there. It is a nice structure. Someone would pay good money to have a backyard office. It has electricity and insulation and a window that faces the garden. It is valuable, but I pushed the thought away as soon as it came. That was Mark's space. His sanctuary, his dream. I could not take that from him, not yet, not while there was still hope. But the months got harder. Winter came, and with it came heating bills that made my eyes water. We started eating more pasta and less meat. I stopped buying coffee on the way to work and started making it at home in a cheap drip machine that made it taste like burnt water and regret. Mark grew quieter. He would sit at the dinner table and push his food around his plate without eating much. Lily would chatter about school and her friends and the funny thing that happened during recess, and Mark would nod and smile, but he was not really there. He was somewhere far away, trapped inside his own head, fighting battles I could not see. I would watch him across the table and feel a deep, aching loneliness, like I was married to a ghost. We started arguing about money in whispers so Lily would not hear. Mark would say I did not understand the architecture business, that I was nagging him, that I did not trust him. And maybe he was right. Maybe I stopped trusting him somewhere along the way, not because he lied, but because he stopped sharing things with me. He stopped telling me about his projects. He stopped showing me his blueprints. He stopped asking for my opinion on color schemes and cabinet styles. He would just close the door to his office and disappear for hours, and when he came back to the house, he was like a ghost, present but not really there. I could touch him, but I could not reach him. I tried to talk to him. I really did. One night after Lily went to bed, I sat next to him on the couch and took his hand. His fingers were cold, even though the house was warm and the heat was running. "Mark," I said, "talk to me. What is going on? Are you okay? Are we okay?" He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. Real, deep animal fear. The kind of fear you see in the eyes of a wounded animal that knows it cannot escape. But then it was gone, replaced by that same tired smile he had been wearing for months. "I am fine, Clara, just tired. The market is slow, but it will pick up. You will see, just give me a little more time." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative, that my husband was hiding something terrible from me, was too painful to consider. So I let it go. I kissed his cheek and went to bed alone, and he went back to his office, and the light in the shed burned until dawn. I lay in bed and watched that light through the window, and I wondered what he was doing in there. I wondered if he was working or crying or just sitting in the dark. I wondered if he still loved me. I wondered if I still loved him. Then came the morning that broke something in me. It was a Tuesday, gray and cold, the kind of day that makes you want to stay under the covers and never come out. I was sorting through the mail that had piled up on the kitchen counter, separating bills from junk when I found it. A thick envelope with bold red letters that said "Final Notice" in a font that seemed designed to cause panic. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. Inside was an eviction notice. Not a warning, not a late notice. An actual eviction notice from our bank. We had missed 3 mortgage payments. 3, I had no idea. Mark handled the finances. He had always handled the finances. And I had let him because it was easier, because I trusted him, because that is what marriage is supposed to be. 2 people trusting each other to carry their share of the weight. I stood in the kitchen with that piece of paper in my hand, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. 3 missed payments. How was that possible? Where had the money gone? I thought about the savings account, the one we had built over years of careful saving. It should have been enough to cover at least a few months of mortgage payments. But I had not checked the balance in months. I had been too scared, too trusting, too willing to look away. I thought about all the times Mark had said, "Do not worry, I have it under control." I thought about all the times I had believed him. I thought about how stupid I felt, standing in my own kitchen with an eviction notice in my hand, realizing that my trust had been misplaced. I waited for Mark to come back from dropping Lily off at school. He walked through the door at 8:15, same as every morning, carrying a travel mug of coffee and looking exhausted. His eyes were red, and his hair was messier than usual. I was standing in the middle of the living room holding the eviction notice, and my hand was shaking so badly that the paper rattled like a dry leaf in the wind. "Clara," he said, and his voice was soft, the way it used to be when he would tell me he loved me. "What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost." I held up the notice. "When were you going to tell me about this? When were you going to tell me that we are about to lose our house?" His face went pale. Not pale like he was surprised, but pale like he had been expecting this moment for a long time and was still not ready for it. He set his coffee mug on the table, and I noticed that his hands were shaking too. He walked toward me slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal that might bite. "Clara, I was going to fix it. I have been talking to the bank. They said if we can pay half of what we owe by the end of the month, they will work with us. They said they understand that people fall on hard times, they just need to see some good faith. Half. My voice came out higher than I intended, almost a scream. Half of what? How much do we owe, Mark? Tell me the truth. All of it? He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he had since college. He would do it when he was studying for finals, when he was nervous about a job interview, when he was trying to find the right words to say. $30,000 in missed payments and fees. Half is $15,000. I can get it, Clara. I have a client who is interested in a big project. If I can just close that deal, we will have the money. We just need a little more time. $15,000. I felt the words hit me like physical blows, like punches to the stomach. We did not have $15,000. We did not have $1,500. We did not have $500. I looked at him, this man I had loved for 15 years, this man who had held my hand when I gave birth to our daughter, this man who had made me laugh until I cried more times than I could count. And for the first time, I felt a cold distance between us, like he was standing on the other side of a frozen lake and I could not reach him. I did not even want to reach him. Where did the money go, Mark? Our savings, our emergency fund, everything we put away for years. Where is it? What did you spend it on? He looked down at his shoes. They were old sneakers, the same pair he had been wearing for 3 years. The laces were frayed, and there was a hole near the toe. I used it, for bills, for things. I do not know, Clara, I lost track, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Sorry is not going to keep a roof over Lily's head. I was crying now, hot tears streaming down my face, dripping onto the eviction notice in my hands. Sorry is not going to pay for her winter coat or her school supplies or the food in the refrigerator. I need answers, Mark, real answers, and I need them now. No more lies, no more I do not knows. Tell me the truth. He did not give me answers. He just stood there, silent and broken, his shoulders hunched, his face a mask of shame. And I realized that he had no answers to give. He had been drowning for months, maybe years, and instead of reaching for my hand, he had just let himself sink. And he had taken me and Lily down with him. We were all drowning together, and he had not even told me the water was rising. That is when I made the decision. I am selling the office, I said. The words came out flat, not angry, just final, like a door closing. Mark's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, and for a moment I saw real panic in them. No. Clara, no, you cannot do that. That office is my livelihood. I need it to work. I need it to find new clients and finish existing projects and get us out of this mess. Without that office, I have nothing. Please. Please do not do this. Mark, you are not working. My voice was cold now, colder than I meant it to be, colder than I had ever spoken to him. Or if you are not getting paid. Something is wrong and you are not telling me what. The office is an asset. We need cash. It is that simple. I am selling it and I am not asking for your permission. He argued. He pleaded. He said he would find a way. He always found a way, just give him more time. He said the office was his dream, his sanctuary, the only place he felt like himself. He said selling it would be like cutting off his arm, like losing a part of his soul. He got down on his knees in the middle of the living room and begged me to reconsider. But I had given him years of time. I had given him patience and understanding and the benefit of the doubt. And now I was looking at an eviction notice and a daughter who needed a winter coat and a marriage that was crumbling into dust. I made a decision, and I stuck to it. I walked away from him, went into the bedroom, and closed the door. I did not come out until morning. The next day, while Mark took Lily to school, I walked out to the shed. I had not been inside in months. Mark kept the door locked, but I had a spare key hidden under a flower pot near the back steps, a secret we had shared since the day the office was finished. I remember the smell when I opened the door. It was not the smell of pencils and paper and coffee that I remembered from the early days, when Mark would invite me in to show me his latest designs. It was stale, like closed air, like secrets, like something that had been dead for a long time. The blinds were drawn tight, blocking out the morning sun. The desk was cluttered with papers, but not blueprints. Bills. Old bills, unopened envelopes, notices from creditors. I sat down in his chair, the same chair he had sat in for countless hours, and I started going through the papers one by one. And with every envelope I opened, I felt a little more of my love for him turn into something hard and cold, like water turning to ice. There were credit card bills with minimum payments marked in red pen, past due notices stamped in angry letters. There were loan applications that had been stamped DENIED in bold red ink. There was a letter from a client demanding a refund for a project Mark had started but never finished, a whole house renovation that had been abandoned halfway through. The client's words were professional but angry, and I could feel his frustration bleeding off the page. And then I found a stack of letters from a woman named Diane. They were not love letters. They were worse. They were business letters, professional and cold, from someone who had hired Mark to design a commercial building 2 years ago. According to the letters, Mark had taken a $50,000 deposit, drawn up initial plans, and then disappeared. Diane's lawyer was threatening legal action. $50,000. The number echoed in my head like a scream, like a gunshot, like something breaking. I sat there in his chair in his office, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies, and I cried. Not the pretty kind of crying you see in movies, where a single tear rolls down a perfect cheek. The ugly kind, with snot and sobs and the horrible realization that the person you trusted most in the world had been hiding a mountain of debt and broken promises. I cried for the house we were losing, the house where Lily had taken her first steps, where we had celebrated every birthday and anniversary. I cried for Lily, who had no idea that her family was falling apart, who still believed that her daddy could fix anything. But mostly, I cried for myself, for the Clara who believed in fairy tales and happy endings and the fundamental goodness of the man she married. That Clara was gone now. She had died in this dusty, cluttered shed, surrounded by bills and shame and the smell of secrets. When I finally stopped crying, I wiped my face with my sleeve and called a real estate agent I knew from the dental office where I worked. Her name was Patricia, and she was a shark in heels, the kind of woman who could sell ice to an Eskimo and make them thank her for it. I told her I wanted to sell the backyard office as fast as possible, no questions asked, no inspections needed, just get it done. She came over that afternoon, walked through the space with a critical eye and gave me a number, $25,000. It was a custom build, good bones, desirable location. She could have it sold in a week, maybe less. I said yes. Mark was not home, he was at the library with Lily. He did not know, and for the first time in a long time, I did not care. The next few days were a blur of showings and paperwork. Patricia brought potential buyers through the shed while I stayed in the house, watching from the kitchen window, my arms crossed over my chest. I saw strangers walk through Mark's sanctuary, open his cabinets, tap on his walls, talk about paint colors and flooring. I felt nothing. Mark knew something was happening because strangers kept coming to look at the shed, but he did not ask. He just stayed in the house too, sitting in his armchair, staring at the wall, his face unreadable. We moved around each other like ghosts, sharing space but not words, not touch, not anything that felt like love. I slept on the couch. I made Lily's lunches and took her to school and came home and pretended everything was normal, even though everything was falling apart around us. Lily knew something was wrong. Children always know. They have a sixth sense for tension, for the cracks in the walls that adults try to hide. She started having nightmares and climbing into bed with me on the couch in the middle of the night. She would wrap her small arms around my neck and whisper, "Mommy, is Daddy okay? Why is he so sad all the time?" And I would hold her and tell her that Daddy was fine, that everything was fine, that she did not need to worry. But we both knew I was lying. She could feel the lie in the way my voice shook, in the way I held her too tight, in the way I looked at the closed door of the shed and frowned. The day before the sale was supposed to go through, Mark finally confronted me. It was late, after Lily was in bed. I was sitting on the couch folding laundry, the same laundry I had been folding for 15 years, and I felt so tired that I could barely keep my eyes open. My back ached, my head throbbed, and my heart felt like a stone in my chest. Mark came into the living room and stood in front of me with his hands in his pockets. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, his shoulders hunched, his face pale and drawn, his eyes red from crying or lack of sleep or both. "Clara," he said, "please do not sell the office. There is something I need to tell you first. Something I should have told you a long time ago, something I have been too scared to say." I kept folding, my hands moving automatically, folding a small shirt of Lily's into a perfect square. "I have heard enough, Mark. I found the letters from Diane. I found the bills. I found the loan applications. I know about the $50,000. I know everything. You do not need to say another word." He shook his head, and his eyes were wet with tears that had not yet fallen, glistening in the lamplight. "No, you do not know everything. That is what I am trying to tell you. That is why I need you to come with me. Please, just come with me. Let me show you something. And if after that you still want to sell the office, I will not say another word. I will sign whatever papers you put in front of me. Just give me this one chance to explain." I almost said no. I almost threw the laundry basket at him and walked out the front door and never looked back. I almost called Patricia right then and told her to finalize the sale without me. But something in his voice, some broken note I had never heard before, made me stop. It was the sound of a man who had nothing left to lose. The sound of a man who was finally ready to tell the truth, even if it destroyed him. So I put down the laundry, stood up, and followed him out the back door into the cold night air. The shed looked different in the darkness. The for sale sign was already in the yard, a bright red flag that screamed desperation to anyone who passed by. Patricia had put it up that morning, and I had felt a small, bitter satisfaction when I saw it. Now, standing next to Mark in the moonlight, I felt only emptiness. The air was cold enough to see our breath, and the stars were out, scattered across the sky like tiny diamonds. Mark unlocked the door with hands that trembled, and we walked inside. The space was almost empty now. I had cleared out all the papers, all the evidence of his failures, and stuffed them into garbage bags that were waiting by the curb for morning pickup. There was nothing left but the desk, the chair, and a small safe bolted to the floor in the corner. I had never noticed the safe before. It was hidden behind a stack of old magazines, small and gray and unremarkable, the kind of safe you might buy at an office supply store. Mark knelt down in front of the safe and spun the combination lock. His fingers were steady, but I could see his shoulders shaking beneath his thin sweater. The safe opened with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room, echoing off the walls like a gunshot. He reached inside with both hands and pulled out a stack of documents, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The ribbon had once been bright, I could tell, but time and handling had worn it down to a pale shadow of its former self. He handed the stack to me without a word, and his eyes never left my face. I untied the ribbon with fingers that were suddenly clumsy, fumbling with the knot like a child learning to tie her shoes. The first page was a medical report from a hospital I did not recognize. The second page was a letter from a specialist, full of words I could barely pronounce, words like biopsy and prognosis and frontal lobe. The third page was a bill, but not like the others I had found. This one was from a cancer treatment center, and it had a letterhead that made my blood run cold. I looked up at Mark, and his face was wet with tears that were falling freely now, streaming down his cheeks and dripping onto the floor of the shed. 2 years ago, he said, his voice barely a whisper, so quiet that I had to lean in to hear him. I started getting headaches, bad ones, the kind that made me want to drill a hole in my skull just to let the pressure out. I thought it was stress. I thought if I just worked harder, slept more, drank less coffee, they would go away. But they did not go away. They got worse, and worse, and worse. He paused and took a shaky breath, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I stood frozen, the papers trembling in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I had a seizure while I was driving home from a client meeting. I do not remember any of it. 1 minute I was on the highway, listening to the radio, thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. The next minute I was in a ditch with airbags in my face and a police officer asking me if I knew what year it was. There was blood on my shirt. I did not know where it came from. No one else was hurt. It was just me. But they took me to the hospital and they ran tests. Lots of tests. Blood tests and scans and things I did not understand. And they found a tumor. A small one in my frontal lobe. The doctor said it was treatable. He said if we caught it early, the prognosis was good. But the treatment was expensive, $50,000 expensive. The papers fell from my hands and scattered on the floor like fallen leaves, like snow, like pieces of a life I thought I knew. $50,000. The deposit from Diane. The money that had destroyed his career and our finances and almost our marriage. The money that had turned me into a woman who would sell her husband's dream without asking why. I looked at Mark, and I saw him differently than I had seen him in years. I saw the dark circles under his eyes, the weight he had lost, the tremor in his hands that I had attributed to stress or laziness or something worse. I saw the scars on his scalp, hidden beneath his hair, thin white lines where the surgeons had cut into his skull. I saw a man who had been fighting for his life in silence, alone in this shed, while I slept in the house and wondered why he would not talk to me. I used it to pay for my first round of treatments, he continued, his voice breaking like a twig underfoot. I was going to tell you. I was going to tell Diane too. I had it all planned out. I was going to come home that night and sit you down and tell you everything. I practiced the words in the car on the drive home. I said them out loud over and over until they sounded almost normal. But then I walked in the door and Lily ran up to me with her drawing of our family, and you were making spaghetti, my favorite, and the house smelled like garlic and love, and I could not do it. I could not ruin that moment. So I told myself I would tell you tomorrow. And tomorrow came, and I told myself the same thing. And tomorrow after tomorrow after tomorrow, until months had passed and I had missed deadlines and lost clients and spent all our savings on medical bills, and I was in too deep to climb out. I was in a hole so deep that I could not see the sky anymore. I sank to my knees on the cold floor of the shed, surrounded by the medical reports and the bills and the truth I had been too angry to see. The concrete was cold through my jeans, but I did not feel it. All I could feel was the weight of what he was telling me, the enormity of it pressing down on my chest. Mark knelt in front of me, and I reached out and touched his face. His skin was wet with tears, warm despite the cold. I touched the scars on his scalp, running my fingers over the thin white lines, and he closed his eyes and leaned into my touch like a starving man leaning into a meal. The treatments worked, he said softly, his voice barely audible. The last report says the tumor is gone. It has been gone for 6 months. I am in remission. The doctors say my chances of recurrence are low, but the damage was already done. I had lost Diane's project. I had lost our savings. I had lost my reputation. And I was so scared, Clara. I was so scared of losing you too. You and Lily are everything to me. You are the only reasons I kept fighting. When I was lying in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, feeling like I was dying, the only thing that kept me going was the thought of seeing your face again. So I just kept hiding. I kept pretending that everything was fine, that I was fine, that we would figure it out. But we did not figure it out. We just fell further and further behind, and I did not know how to stop the fall. I did not know how to ask for help. I was crying again, but this time it was different. This time it was not betrayal or anger or the cold hardness that had been growing in my chest for months. This time it was grief. Deep, aching grief for the year we had lost, for the secrets he had carried alone, for the weight he had tried to bear without me. I thought about all those nights when I looked out the window and saw the light on in the shed, and I assumed he was working, or avoiding me, or doing something shameful. He was not working. He was sitting in this chair, alone in the dark, reading medical reports and wondering if he was going to live to see Lily grow up. He was fighting a battle I did not even know existed, and I was angry at him for being tired. I was angry at him for not being the man I wanted him to be when he was just trying to survive. "Why did not you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. "I am your wife. I am supposed to help you carry these things. That is what the vows mean, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse." I meant those words, Mark. I meant every single one of them. I would have been there for you. I would have held your hand. I would have gone to every appointment, sat in every waiting room, held the bucket when you got sick from the chemotherapy. Why did you not let me? Mark sank onto the floor next to me, his back against the safe. He pulled his knees up to his chest and wrapped his arms around them, like a child trying to make himself small. Because I was ashamed. Because I was supposed to be the one who took care of you. That was my job. That was my role. I was the husband, the father, the provider. And instead, I ruined everything. I lost Diane's project. I lost our savings. I almost lost our house. And I could not stand the thought of you looking at me the way you are looking at me right now. Like I am broken. Like I am less than the man you married. Like I failed you. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold, just like they had been that night on the couch when I tried to talk to him and he pushed me away. But this time, he did not push. He held on tight, like I was the only thing keeping him from floating away into the darkness. His grip was so strong that it almost hurt, but I did not pull away. "You are not broken," I said. "You are sick, or you were sick. There is a difference. And I am not angry that you got sick. I am angry that you faced it alone. I am angry that you did not trust me enough to let me help you. I am angry that you let me believe you were lying and cheating and betraying me when you were just trying to survive. You should have told me. You should have let me be your partner." He looked at me, and his eyes were red and swollen, his nose running, his whole face a mess of tears and regret. "I am sorry, Clara. I am so sorry. I know that does not fix anything. I know it does not bring back the money or the trust or the years we lost. But I am sorry. I am sorry for every lie I told and every truth I hid and every night you fell asleep wondering if I still loved you. I do love you. I have always loved you. I was just too scared to show it. I was too scared of being weak." We sat on the floor of the shed for a long time, holding hands in the dark. The medical reports were scattered around us like evidence of a crime, which I suppose they were. The crime was not the tumor. The crime was the silence. The crime was the fear. The crime was a man who loved his family so much that he tried to protect them from his own pain, and in doing so, caused them even more. The clock on the wall ticked, the wind blew outside, and we sat there, two people who had been lost, finally finding each other again. The next morning, I called Patricia and canceled the sale. She was annoyed, but I did not care. I told her the office was no longer for sale, and she said some words I chose to ignore, and then I hung up and never called her again. Then I called our bank and explained the situation. I sent them the medical reports. I told them about the tumor, about the treatments, about the seizure on the highway, about the fear and the shame and the silence. I told them everything. The woman on the phone was quiet for a long time. I could hear her typing, then stopping, then typing again. Then she said, "Mrs. Davis, I am going to put a hold on the eviction. You have 6 months to catch up on the payments, and I am going to connect you with our hardship department. They have programs for situations like this. Medical debt is something we see all the time. You are not alone." It was not a miracle, but it was a lifeline. I took it with both hands and held on tight. I also called Diane. That was the hardest call I have ever made in my entire life. Harder than calling the bank. Harder than telling my mother that Mark was sick. I sat on the back porch with my phone in my hand for 20 minutes before I worked up the courage to dial her number. I watched the birds at the feeder. I watched the clouds move across the sky. I watched a squirrel chase another squirrel up a tree, and then I took a deep breath and pressed call. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. I introduced myself as Mark's wife, and there was a long pause, so long that I thought she had hung up. "Mrs. Davis," she said finally, "I have been waiting for this call for 2 years." I told her everything. I told her about the tumor, about the treatments, about the seizure on the highway, about the fear and the shame and the silence. I told her that Mark had used her deposit to save his own life, and that he had been too scared to tell her the truth. I told her that we had no money to pay her back, not right now, but that I would spend the rest of my life trying to make it right if she would give us a chance. I told her that I was sorry, that Mark was sorry, that we were both so deeply sorry for the pain we had caused her. She was quiet for so long that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. It was. I could hear her breathing. And then she took a deep breath and said something I will never forget. "Mrs. Davis, I was angry for 2 years. I was angry at your husband for taking my money and disappearing. I was angry at myself for trusting him. I was angry at the world for being so unfair. But I am not angry anymore. I cannot be angry at a man who was fighting for his life. Tell Mark to get better. Tell him to focus on his health and his family. The money can wait. The rest can be fixed. We will work something out. We will find a way." I cried when I hung up the phone. I cried for Diane's forgiveness, which we did not deserve. I cried for Mark's survival, which we had almost lost. And I cried for myself, for the strength I did not know I had until I needed it. I sat on the back porch and watched the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink and purple, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Mark started seeing a therapist the following week. A kind woman named Dr. Evans who specialized in medical trauma and anxiety. She had a calm voice and a cozy office with a couch that Mark said was surprisingly comfortable. She helped him understand that his silence was not weakness, but a symptom of his fear. She helped him learn to use his words again, to tell me when he was struggling, to reach for my hand instead of pushing it away. He started taking medication for the anxiety that had been eating him alive for years, a little white pill he took every morning with breakfast. And slowly, very slowly, he started to look like himself again. Not the Mark from before the tumor, because that Mark was gone. That Mark had died in the hospital, or maybe in the shed, or maybe somewhere along the way without either of us noticing. But a new Mark. A Mark who had been through the fire and come out the other side, scarred but still standing. A Mark who knew how to say the words, "I need help." He started working again, too. Small projects at first, designing a deck for a neighbor, drawing up plans for a family's kitchen renovation. Then bigger projects, a small office building, a community center, a library addition that made the local paper. He was careful not to take on too much. He was careful to communicate with his clients, to be honest about his limitations, to ask for help when he needed it. And the clients appreciated it. They trusted him because he was honest with them. It turned out that honesty was not a weakness. It was the strongest thing he had. I still work at the dental office. I still clean teeth and calm nervous patients and come home tired at the end of the day. But now, when I come home, Mark is usually in the kitchen making dinner. He learned to cook during his recovery, watching YouTube videos and experimenting with recipes. He is actually pretty good at it. His spaghetti is still my favorite, but he has added new dishes to his repertoire. A lasagna that Lily loves, a chicken soup that he says is good for the soul. We eat together at the dining room table, the three of us, Lily chattering about her day at school, Mark and I holding hands under the table like teenagers on a first date. It is not the life I imagined. It is better, because it is real, because it is ours. The shed is still in the backyard. The for sale sign is long gone and Patricia has stopped calling. Mark uses the office every day, but now the door is always unlocked. I bring him coffee in the mornings, just like I used to, and sometimes I sit with him while he sketches, and we talk about things we used to keep hidden. We talk about his fears and my worries and Lily's dreams. We talk about the tumor and the treatments and the nights we spent apart when we should have been together. We talk about everything, and nothing is off limits anymore. The shed is no longer a place of secrets. It is a place of healing. We are not out of the woods, we still have debt, we still have hard days. There are mornings when Mark wakes up with that distant look in his eyes, and I know he is thinking about the past, about the tumor, about the what-ifs. There are nights when I lie awake and wonder if we will ever fully recover financially, if we will ever be able to send Lily to college, if we will ever be able to retire. But we are not lying anymore. And that makes all the difference. That is the foundation we are building on now. Not secrets, not shame, not silence, but truth.